There are moments in the life of a nation that come without warning, yet have the power to change the heartbeat of an entire country. These moments do not come from battles, nor from grand declarations, nor from closed-door meetings inside marble chambers. They arrive on days that seem utterly ordinary. A slightly warm afternoon, a stream of people moving in the same direction, a distant cheer rising from somewhere unseen, and then suddenly the attention of an entire nation gathers at a single point. On that day, that point of convergence was Ibrahim Traoré Stadium, the new heart of Ouagadougou. Before the sun had even set, the sky above the city seemed to tremble, not because of music and not because of fireworks, but because of the footsteps of tens of thousands moving toward one place, as if they all knew that this day was not simply the inauguration of a stadium. It felt like a declaration that a new Africa was rising, and on that day, the people of Burkina Faso were not going to watch football, they were going to witness history. From early morning, the crowd was already flowing toward the boulevard leading into Ouagadougou. You could feel the anticipation moving through the air, someone buying water, someone preparing a flag, someone laughing non-stop. But what made this day truly different were their eyes that showed no fatigue, no doubt, no weariness, eyes filled with belief in something greater than each individual, eyes of a people learning how to hope again after many years of shrinking themselves to survive challenge after challenge. There was no loudspeaker, no one directing them, yet they walked together, guided by an invisible rhythm everyone could sense, and as they approached the stadium, the first thing they saw was a security presence unlike anything before. 6 control checkpoints at the entrance, then 3 more deeper inside. The soldiers stood upright, eyes sharp and observant, yet their demeanor was calm, respectful, and professional. They checked every ticket, every bag. There was no chaos, no complaints, only an orderliness so surprising it felt almost ceremonial. The reason for such careful preparation was simple. That day did not belong only to the people. It was also the day the youngest leader on the continent, the man Africa was speaking about, the man who reignited Burkina Faso's national pride, would appear before 26,000 people waiting for him. His name rose from group to group like a current running under the entire city. They called Traoré's name with excitement, not fear, because he was more than a president. In their eyes, he was the emblem of a new era. But before that moment arrived, before he stepped into the light of tens of thousands of expectant eyes, something even more important was happening. It was the moment people first saw their own stadium shining like a landmark in the heart of the city. From afar, the lights surrounding it formed a halo. The blocks of green, red, and yellow on the stands appeared as a living flag, created by the clothes people chose to wear. No one told them to do that. They did it because pride left them no other choice. And amid the laughter and buzzing conversation, amid a space vibrating with the rhythm of a collective heartbeat, there were small, ordinary moments that suddenly felt precious. A man struggling to scan his ticket, a friend teasing him about his outfit, joking that he looked important enough to be waved through. These simple exchanges became unforgettable because they showed that this monumental event was also a day of innocence, joy, and unity. That warmth made the larger picture of the day even more beautiful. And as more and more people streamed inside, as the stands began to glow like an ocean of stars, the feeling was like watching a wounded nation learn how to breathe again. People came not just to see a stadium, they came to witness something generations before them believed their country could never reach: a world-class structure. A day when the world had to look toward Burkina Faso, a leader standing with his people, not above them. That day, Ouagadougou did not shine because of the lights alone. It shone because of belief. And in the moment, 26,000 voices rose together. The entire city seemed to send a message that the old era had stepped aside, and a new chapter of Burkina Faso was opening right here, in this very moment. Share your thoughts in the comments and get ready to step into the next part, where the story grows even hotter with the footsteps of tens of thousands moving toward the new center of their own history. To understand why the inauguration of Ibrahim Traoré Stadium became a defining milestone for Burkina Faso, we have to look at the path the country had walked for many years. A small nation in the heart of Africa, once buried under hardship, scarcity, and invisible limits that people had grown used to accepting as part of their fate. Yet every story in history reaches a turning point. And for Burkina Faso, the day Ouagadougou awakened to the footsteps of tens of thousands was exactly that turning point. This city was no stranger to large gatherings, but 1,000 people is different from 10,000, and 10,000 is nothing like the 26,000 who filled every entrance, every row of seats, every road leading to the center. On that day, Ouagadougou felt like a giant body that had just been infused with new blood. A city used to a modest rhythm of life suddenly became the place the entire nation's gaze converged upon. The difference was not in the number of people. It was in the reason they were there. In the past, large gatherings were often sparked by protest, frustration, or the need to rise against injustice. But that day, the people streaming in from every district did not come because they were lacking or angry. They came to witness something that had never existed in their country. They came because a growing pride was pushing them forward. And they came because they saw the name of their nation being written in a completely new way, where the future was no longer a distant idea. For them, the stadium was not just a structure. It was proof that Burkina Faso could build what the world believed only wealthy nations could achieve. Every block of concrete, every row of seats, every beam of light carried the spirit of a new era taking shape. Not an era of borrowing or dependence, an era of self-reliance and confidence. They looked at that structure and saw themselves in it. Resilient, humble, but never defeated. The atmosphere before the ceremony felt like a current running through the entire city. People spoke to one another with an energy rarely seen in a place that had endured years of instability. Street vendors ran by with hopeful smiles. A father lifted his child onto his shoulders, wanting them to witness this national moment even before they were old enough to understand it. Groups of young people wrapped in the colors of the national flag ran and laughed as if they were about to join a cultural festival more than a football event. And though the stadium shimmered on the outside, the most important element was the spirit filling the air. Because the real context of that day was not the freshly painted walls, the international standard field, the security systems, or the modern lights. The real context lived in people's hearts, in the change they had been feeling day by day since the country stepped into a new chapter. There is something remarkable that happens when a nation begins to regain its belief. Everything around them starts to take on meaning. A new stadium makes them believe the future can change. A day of celebration makes them believe the country can unite. A moment standing side by side makes them believe they are not as small as the world once judged them to be. On that day, Ouagadougou did not simply wake from an ordinary sleep. It woke from a sleep that had lasted for decades. Amid the pounding footsteps and the cheers echoing from every corner, people felt that their country was no longer moving by old inertia. Something was pushing Burkina Faso forward, a fresh, powerful, steady current. That day, Ouagadougou did not just wake up, it rose, and when a city rises, an entire nation follows. That is why the scene of that day became the perfect setting for history to be written in a more magnificent way than ever before. The journey into Ibrahim Traoré Stadium that day was not an ordinary walk, not just a matter of holding a ticket and stepping through a gate. It felt like entering the center of a rising wave, where every step carried a blend of anticipation and reverence. From the moment people reached the first layer of security, everyone understood this was not merely a football event. This was a day the entire nation was pouring its heart into protecting, as if they were safeguarding the most precious thing they had ever created. The first security checkpoint appeared earlier than most expected. Tall barricades, long lines of people, and soldiers standing solemnly under the Ouagadougou sun. But no one felt irritated. On the contrary, they saw it as proof of the event's significance. Having their tickets checked, being asked to open their bags, being guided forward step by step, all of it made people feel like they were entering a place where safety was held above everything else. The second checkpoint, then the third, each layer revealing the sense of a place being guarded like the heart of Africa itself. With every gate crossed, the sounds behind them grew softer, and the sounds ahead grew louder. It was as if they were stepping through an invisible boundary, crossing from the chaotic outside world into a space where pride and anticipation were gathering into a single, immense force. Even ordinary conversations slowed, softened, as though everyone sensed they were collectively shaping a moment that could not afford a single mistake. Security was not the only thing people admired. The way the forces coordinated the movement of the crowd earned genuine respect. Young soldiers with focused eyes but without tension, voices gentle yet firm, guiding each group to the right path. There were moments when someone did not understand a direction, yet they were met with patient help. No shouting, no rushing. Every movement felt calculated to ensure that all 26,000 people could enter in the most orderly way. This calmness made people feel clearly that their country was changing, even in the smallest details. As they approached the final checkpoint, the anticipation seemed to peak. Many had passed through 7, 8, even 9 layers of checks. Some had to scan their tickets more than once. Some had to explain why their code was not reading. Some laughed with friends because their formal outfits made staff double-check them. These small, everyday moments added joy to the tight procedures, like a reminder that no matter how serious the day was, the people still carried the unmistakable innocence of their nation. And then the moment came when the final gate opened. Light spilled through, heat rushed out from the packed stands inside. The roar of the crowd, previously just a distant echo, now crashed forward like a wave striking directly at the chest. In that instant, all exhaustion from passing through so many checkpoints dissolved. Everyone who stepped in paused for a few seconds, their eyes wide with disbelief at standing inside such a modern structure on their own soil. Before them was the wide-open sky of the stadium. The stands rose like a valley of light, rows of seats stretching in perfect lines. Flags of Burkina Faso waved from countless hands. The red, yellow, and green appeared like bright, pulsing heartbeats of the nation. It was almost impossible to describe the feeling in words. It was like stepping out of a dark tunnel and suddenly seeing a world you had dreamed of but never truly believed could exist in your homeland. Crossing that threshold, people were not just entering a stadium. They were stepping into the symbol of a new Burkina Faso, a place where national pride awakened, where unity showed itself in every smile, every clap, every moment people placed their hopes in the future. When people stepped through the final gate and the entire space opened before them, most stood still for a few seconds, just to make sure what they were seeing was real. Ibrahim Traoré Stadium was no longer a concept, no longer a dream carried by articles or speeches. It existed in front of them in light, in sound, in color, in a scale so breathtaking it made every heart beat faster. And although the people of Burkina Faso were used to simplicity, they could not contain the pride that slowly warmed their chests. The first thing that captured everyone's eyes was the harmony of the space. Every detail, from the rows of seats, the track, the pitch, to the lighting system, was arranged with a level of refinement rarely seen in previous structures in the region. No corner felt excessive and no feature felt out of place. Everything came together like a symphony of lines and forms, modern yet carrying a distinct personality of the Sahel. The stands stretched like terraces rising toward the sky, creating a sense of openness and freedom. The brand-new seats shone brightly, with no scratches, no signs of time, making every person who entered feel like they were part of an international class event. The lighting spilled evenly across the entire field, leaving no dark spot anywhere. That alone made many people nod in astonishment, knowing how much vision and investment were required to reach such standards. The supporting facilities were just as impressive.
West Africa,
The
where Russia
restrooms were
continues
clean,
to deepen
spacious,
its ties
and free of the worn-out look so common in other stadiums in the region. The interior functional rooms were arranged logically, equipped and ready for international teams. Some people kept repeating the word modern, because what they were seeing surpassed anything they had ever imagined for a national sports structure. The exterior grounds carried a beauty of their own. Newly paved walkways and neatly arranged trees lined the entrance, creating a welcoming feel for anyone arriving. Secondary sports areas such as basketball courts, hockey fields, and training zones were placed neatly throughout the grounds. Everything showed that this was not a structure built quickly for one event. It was built to serve a generation, perhaps many generations, who would grow up proud of their homeland. The level of completion made many people glance at each other with disbelief. They had once heard how FIFA refused to allow Burkina Faso to host international matches in their old stadium due to poor facilities. But now, standing in this radiant space, seeing the meticulous detail in every corner, they knew that story belonged to the past. The ticket back onto the global football map lay right beneath their feet, embodied in a structure worthy of competing with any major stadium in the region. It was not only about the seats or the pitch. The entire space radiated a kind of energy that felt almost strange, as if anyone stepping into it was lifted instantly by the collective atmosphere. Pride spread faster than the cheers. In that moment, everyone understood that this was not a project built by leaders alone or by the government alone. This was a structure of the people, born from every drop of sweat, every hour of labor from the workers, every prayer whispered in homes, every quiet hope the people of Burkina Faso had held for years. Looking around the stands, seeing the shirts in the colors of the national flag scattered everywhere, people felt something unmistakable. This stadium was not just a destination for sport, it was a symbol of rising. A proof in concrete and light that a nation once considered weak could create something extraordinary, not by relying on anyone, not by bowing to any power, but by standing on its own will and its own dreams. The stadium shone, and in its light, Burkina Faso stood a little taller, a little more confident, and far stronger than ever before. Amid the grandeur of a brand new stadium, among the modern lights and the endless rows of seats slowly filling like a rising sea of people, it was the simple, everyday moments of the citizens that formed the true soul of the day. There was something profoundly beautiful about a national landmark being completed not only by steel and concrete, but by the small, warm, human fragments of ordinary life. These were stories not written in any script, not arranged by anyone, yet they shone naturally like little stars around a great sun. A middle-aged man stood fiddling in front of the ticket scanner. He raised his ticket once, no response. A second time, still silence. He turned to his friend, half embarrassed and half laughing. His friend patted his shoulder and teased him, saying his overly formal outfit probably made the machine think he was a government official. Both burst into laughter, and their laughter drew amused glances from those nearby. No one showed impatience. Instead, the moment became a bright little highlight in the long line of people moving forward. After a few more minutes, a security staff member used a general access pass to let him through. As he walked in, he lifted his thumb with a smile full of African warmth, as if he had just overcome an important challenge. Not far from him, a group of young people wrapped in the national colors were debating enthusiastically about a halftime game. They did not hesitate to dance right in the middle of the crowd, their footsteps syncing with the drum beats everyone could hear deep inside the stadium. Every time one of them showed a new move, the whole group burst out laughing as they tried to mimic it. Their spontaneity turned the entrance walkway into a kind of street stage where everyone, performer or spectator, felt like they belonged. There were beautiful moments when older generations and younger generations blended into one another with warmth and gentleness. An elderly man wearing a red, yellow, green shawl stood in line. Beside him was his grandson, eyes wide with excitement. The old man leaned down to say something. The child laughed, then looked toward the stadium as if witnessing a miracle. One day, when that child grows up, he will not only remember the match, he will remember the day he held his grandfather's hand and entered a place where the entire nation had placed its hope. He will remember this atmosphere, this laughter, and the feeling of a country stepping into a new era. In the corridor leading to the stands, someone who had just bought a bottle of water turned to help a young woman who did not speak French negotiate with the vendor. He translated her words, explained the price, then pointed her toward the most convenient path to her seating area. She bowed slightly to thank him, and he simply smiled and continued walking, as if helping strangers was the most natural thing in the world. Little acts like that made it clear that people had not come only to watch football. They had come to share a collective spirit, to feel the closeness among strangers on a day that truly felt like a national celebration. Near the eastern stand, a group of friends set up their phone to record themselves entering the stadium for the first time. When the stands lit up before them, they froze for a moment. Then, unable to contain it, they all shouted at once, making the people around them laugh. Joy spread quickly. It felt like a breeze moving from person to person, planting a small seed of happiness in everyone's heart. Through all of this, you could clearly see the identity of Burkina Faso. A nation rich in kindness, rich in innocence, yet strong in willpower. A people capable of turning simple, ordinary moments into memories so beautiful that anyone who witnessed them would want to carve them deeply in their heart. Those small fragments gathered together became the true soul of this historic day. Not the official ceremony, not the speeches, but the breath of the people pouring into their new stadium with open hearts. That is what made Ibrahim Traoré Stadium alive and worthy of pride. Not only because it was modern, but because it became the place where joy, unity, and national identity shone more brightly than ever before. There are moments when thousands of people hold their breath at the same time, moments in which no one needs a command, no one needs to be told anything, yet everyone rises together as if an invisible thread has pulled them to their feet. And on that afternoon, when the drums pounded harder, when the chants from the eastern stand answered the western stand like waves speaking to each other, the whole stadium suddenly softened. A thin silence floated across the air. Everyone knew what was about to happen. Then suddenly, from the dark tunnel leading onto the field, a narrow beam of light broke through. A silhouette appeared. No one needed to see the face. No introduction was necessary. Just that posture alone was enough to make tens of thousands of hearts beat one note harder than usual. And then the sound that everyone there would never forget began rising from one corner of the stands, spreading like fire-catching wind. Traoré, Traoré, Traoré. That sound was not ordinary cheering. It felt like a declaration, like the voice of a nation telling itself that it had found its guide again. Through years of hardship, this country had learned how to stand firm in storms. But when Traoré appeared, people felt clearly that they no longer had to stand alone. His figure stepping out of the tunnel, eyes calm yet burning with resolve, created an emotion no pen could ever describe fully. He did not walk fast, nor did he put on a show. Traoré advanced onto the field with steady steps, unhurried, unpretentious. And that made people love him even more. Their leader did not need to prove anything. His presence was the proof. Proof of a real transformation taking place. Proof of a trust being restored to this nation. Some held back tears. Some laughed loudly. Some raised their flags high as if entrusting all their hope to that young man. Those who were there said they had never seen the stands shake like that. The ground felt as if it vibrated softly with every shout. The air thickened with excitement. And strangely, in all the noise, there was no chaos. It was as if everyone was connected by one invisible thread. Every clap mattered. Every cheer came from the deepest part of their hearts. Traoré stopped at the center of the field. He looked around, not with pride, but with the emotion of a man who understood exactly the weight resting on his shoulders. He knew the people were not there just to see him. They were there to witness a new Burkina Faso finding itself again. And he was the one who lit the flame for that journey. No speech was needed, no microphone, no special effects. The connection between him and the people was enough to turn that instant into one of the most defining moments in the nation's history. A child on his father's shoulders screamed until his voice cracked. An elderly man lifted his silver head high, his eyes shimmering as if they were seeing something he had waited his whole life to witness. Groups of young people sat pressed together, pounding the rhythm of his name, sending the message that their generation had chosen this path, the path of self-reliance, freedom, and belief. No one commanded it, yet tens of thousands rose to their feet. And in that moment, the stadium was no longer a concrete structure. It became the beating heart of a nation pounding louder than ever before. When Traoré lifted his hand and gently waved toward the stands, the sound exploded into a massive wave. Those cheers were not just for him, they were for the people themselves, for the pride of touching the new shape of their country. That evening, Burkina Faso did not simply witness the appearance of a president. They witnessed the appearance of themselves, stronger, more confident, more united. That is why that moment became the lightning bolt that awakened the soul of an entire nation. When the moment of Traoré's appearance finally settled, the stadium seemed to hold a long breath before erupting once more. At that point, 26,000 people turned their eyes to the field, because the second performance of the afternoon was about to begin. A match not only of football, but of memory, of honor, of the legends who had once carried the name of Burkina Faso and the continent onto the world's map. The opening whistle sliced through the thick air like a spear. In that instant, every outside sound seemed to vanish. The entire stadium paused for one heartbeat, then burst open like a string pulled tight, finally snapping into music. The players in red stepped forward like warriors, not to fight, but to remind their people that they had once stood victorious through pure pride. The match that day was not for a trophy. It was a reunion between generations, between those who once dominated African fields and the young faces now carrying the new dreams of the nation. Every touch of the ball was met with an eruption. Even the softest shot earned cascading applause. No one watched the match to judge technique. They watched to relive the pure joy football once brought them, joy that years of war, hardship, and instability had forced them to forget. The presence of the legends electrified the stands. Each time the ball reached a familiar player, cheers rolled out like waves hitting the shore. And whenever a clever move appeared, tens of thousands rose to their feet at once. The field became a stage where every motion was followed with respect, pride, and a deep love for the game. But the moment that stayed etched in everyone's memory came from the sky. When the match passed 20 minutes, the wind suddenly shifted. Something dove from above with force and precision. Although many had heard rumors of a skydiving display, no one was truly ready for it. A skydiver swept across Ouagadougou's sky, a Burkina Faso flag billowing behind him. The sunset lit the fabric so that it glowed gold, brilliant, and alive. The roar that followed drowned out every surrounding sound. Then a second skydiver appeared, then a third. Each landing made the entire stadium tremble, as if the earth itself was cheering. These moments were not just a performance. They were a declaration that Burkina Faso was strong enough to host a major event, confident enough to create a spectacle that would make the world look up. Each landing was a visual proclamation that this nation no longer stood in the shadows. It had stepped into the light and was ready to spread its wings. In the stands, people embraced, laughed, applauded, lifted their phones to capture every second. Some stood still, simply wanting to absorb the moment, afraid that blinking might make it disappear. Children ran along the aisles, waving small flags, shouting the skydivers' names as if calling out to superheroes. Even the elders seated in the upper rows could not hide their emotion. More than anyone, they understood that this was something they once thought they would only see on international broadcasts, not on the soil of their own homeland. The match continued with the spirit of a festival. No arguments, no unnecessary collisions, only the sound of boots brushing grass, the bounce of the ball, and the relentless echo of cheers. The late afternoon sun cast a golden glow across the field, as if nature itself wanted to help make the match more beautiful. When the first half ended, the entire stadium rose in applause, not because of goals or score lines, but because they were living a day when their emotions were placed back where they belonged, in the most honest place of pride and freedom. Everyone seemed to understand that this match would live on in memory not because of technique, but because it symbolized a day when their nation stood tall with a new form and a new spirit. Share your thoughts in the comments and prepare to move into the next part, where the match becomes only the beginning of deeper reflections on the true meaning of this historic day. As the second half of the match unfolded amid laughter, cheers, and the spontaneous, emotional touches of the legends on the field, one thing became increasingly clear. What happened that day went far beyond the boundaries of sport. It felt like a story in which football was only the outer shell, and inside it was a profound message about national spirit, about the transformation of a country once underestimated, and about the rising ambition of millions. On the field, the players chased the ball, but in the stands, thousands were seeing something much deeper. They saw their own growth reflected in every rhythmic clap. They saw the path Burkina Faso was walking, a path that could not avoid danger but had never lacked courage. They felt a trust they once thought they had lost returning to them as they witnessed things that once seemed impossible now standing before their eyes. And on a deeper level, people understood that this new stadium was the strongest statement yet, that their country could stand on its own without needing anyone to grant them permission or point the way. In the past, Burkina Faso had been limited by outside judgments, by weak infrastructure, by the inability to host international caliber events. But on that day, when they saw the perfectly aligned seats, the flawless pitch, the radiant lighting system, and heard the confident announcements echo through the air, they understood that a new page had truly been turned. Many older people in the crowd had lived through years when the country was submerged in turmoil. They had seen opportunities slip away, projects abandoned, dreams held back by scarcity and instability. And that sunny afternoon, as they sat beside their children and grandchildren, watching tens of thousands line up calmly, watching children run freely without fear, they felt a peace they had waited for their whole lives, a peace not born from silence, but from the reassurance that their country was now moving in the right direction. One remarkable thing spread across the stands: the spirit of discipline. No pushing, no fighting. 26,000 people from every class, region, and culture sat together like one large family. Where did that order come from? It came from the understanding that people were being given back the right to be proud of their country. When people have faith, they naturally protect what they cherish. That is why this event was beautiful, not only because of its scale or its imagery, but because of its rare, instinctive civility. Football has always been a sport of community, of unity. But when the cheers echoed through Ibrahim Traoré STADIUM, they carried an even deeper meaning. The people were not only cheering for the legends or the young players, they were cheering for Burkina Faso itself. They were cheering for the path of self-reliance, for the future they dreamed of, for the life they wanted to build with their own hands. Every shout that day felt like a quiet oath to their homeland. And as the match moved into its final minutes, no one thought about the score. No one left the stadium out of disappointment or impatience. What they felt was completeness, a rare completeness, because they knew they were living a day when the entire nation aligned toward a shared purpose. The stadium that day was living proof that collective spirit, unity, and pride can turn a football match into the symbol of a new era. That day, football was only the catalyst. The real change lived in the hearts of the people, in the way they looked at their country with new eyes, stronger eyes, more trusting eyes. And in the applause that closed the match, everyone understood that they had not just watched a game. They had witnessed themselves stepping into the next chapter of the Burkina Faso story. When the final whistle of the match sounded, the sun was already leaning toward the horizon of Ouagadougou. The last golden light of the day spilled across the field, settling on the radiant faces of 26,000 people who had just lived a full afternoon of pride. But what happened next was what later surprised many around the world when they watched the recorded footage. If the emotional eruption during the match showed how strong Burkina Faso's spirit was, then the moment of leaving the stadium showed just how profoundly the nation had changed. Normally, after major events, the sight of a crowd leaving a stadium is the most chaotic moment. People push forward, some desperately look for quicker exits, voices rise, and collisions are inevitable. But at Ibrahim Traoré Stadium that day, a completely different scene unfolded. Even though 26,000 people stood up at once, their movement was gentle, synchronized, almost impossibly smooth. It felt as if an invisible rhythm was guiding every step. People in the upper rows waited for those below to move first. Groups of young friends held on to each other as they descended the steps. Elderly people were supported carefully by those beside them. Everything unfolded in a warm atmosphere, as if everyone had known each other for years. No shouting, no pressure, no one trying to squeeze past to get out faster. This order was not imposed. It came from mutual respect, from a communal spirit that the people were rediscovering. To maintain order for 26,000 people is something even highly developed countries cannot always achieve. But the security forces of Burkina Faso did not need to be tense that day. They simply stood along the pathways, observing with calm eyes. They were not pushed back by the crowd. At times, people even patted their shoulders to thank them for their work. These young soldiers were not only ensuring safety, they had become symbols of a generation rising to rebuild their country with kindness, discipline, and responsibility. Outside the stadium, the roads leading back into the streets of Ouagadougou began to fill. But what touched many onlookers was the sight of groups slowly branching into different streets while still maintaining composure. Some stopped to buy candy for their children. Some lifted their phones to capture the moment of a massive crowd flowing out like moving bands of color. No one rushed so much that they lost the joy shining in their eyes. Order was not only in their actions, it was in their attitude. The people of Burkina Faso had not come just to watch football. They had come to show the world that chaos is not the nature of Africa. That behind the headlines describing this continent as poor or unstable lies another truth. The truth of a nation that knows how to unite, how to respect, how to protect one another's values. The truth of a people who can transform a massive crowd into a gentle, beautiful current. That calm reflected something far more important. The people believed in their country again. When people believe, they change the way they behave. They become more orderly, more considerate. They understand that small actions, giving way, keeping the line, protecting the environment, are part of a shared responsibility. And that is the foundation of every sustainable form of progress. A man standing outside the stadium said he had never seen his country so beautiful, not because of the stadium lights, not because of the match, but because of the way people treated one another on a single afternoon. He said it was in that moment he felt that the future of Burkina Faso would begin not with grand national plans, but with the attitude of each citizen. And that, he said, was more powerful than anything else. When the sun finally disappeared behind the rooftops of Ouagadougou, the last of the crowd had left. There was no litter scattered across the ground, no arguments lingering in the air, only a Myanmar full of joy, peace, and pride. And as night settled in, the stadium continued to glow like a lighthouse guiding the future of a nation, rising on the strength of its own will. As the stadium lights slowly dimmed and people spread out across the streets, the true meaning of that day finally came into focus. A stadium, no matter how large, is still only concrete, steel, and light. A football match, no matter how emotional, lasts only 90 minutes. But when 26,000 people share the same pride, witness the presence of a leader they trust, and breathe together in an atmosphere unlike anything before, what unfolds is no longer confined to the domain of sports. It becomes a moment that opens a new chapter for Burkina Faso, and perhaps for all of Africa. Many who saw Traoré step onto the field that day thought it was simply a ceremonial appearance, just another presidential entry. But for the millions watching, Traoré represented far more than that. He was the emblem of an Africa awakening, an Africa refusing to accept a fate assigned by outsiders, an Africa choosing to rewrite its own future with the hands of its own people. Every step he took on that field felt like a declaration that the era of bowing down had ended. For decades, many nations across the continent have been painted with the same brush: poor, chaotic, uncivilized. But on that day, the image of Burkina Faso told a completely different story. an international standard stadium, an event organized safely, orderly, and with tremendous inspiration, a young leader standing in the midst of a sea of people, called by name not out of fear, but out of trust and affection. That was not the image of a weak country. It was the image of a nation finding its own voice. Perhaps the reason this event carried significance far beyond a football match was not its scale, but the way it forced a larger question. Is Africa truly as weak as the world claims? That day, Burkina Faso answered with undeniable clarity. When a leader dares to think differently, dares to act, dares to place his people above outside interests, an entire nation can rise in ways no one imagined. People left the stadium with shining eyes not because they were entertained. They shone because they realized they were living in a moment of national transformation. They realized that sometimes a single structure can change the spirit of an entire people. Because it is not merely a place to host matches, it is a symbol that Burkina Faso will no longer accept inferiority, will no longer bend to foreign dominance. They understood that a stadium built by their own will and their own hands was a declaration louder than any speech. The message of that day reached far beyond Ouagadougou. It spread to Mali, Niger, Ghana, Nigeria, Senegal, and across every corner of Africa yearning for autonomy. People there looked toward Burkina Faso and saw a new model. They saw the path Traoré was carving, not through grand speeches, but through tangible action, an international standard sports complex, a strong and disciplined security system, a unity of spirit never seen before, and most importantly, a belief spreading through the hearts of the people. For the countries used to viewing Africa through a lens of pity, that day was a clear reminder that the continent does not need pity. What it needs is respect. And respect cannot come from empty promises. It must come from the undeniable strength of each nation. Burkina Faso, under Traoré's leadership, began demonstrating that strength in a way no one could deny, by building, by uniting, and by reviving its national identity. A stadium may not rewrite history overnight, but it can awaken pride. It can make a new generation see their country with different eyes. It can force the world to reconsider things it once assumed were true. That day, when the final lights went out, what remained was not the whistle, not the footsteps on the grass, not even the spectacular skydiving. What remained was a powerful declaration: Burkina Faso has risen, and when a nation rises, nothing can stop it from moving forward. When night finally settled, the last glow from Ibrahim Traoré Stadium still lingered on the ground, as if it were trying to hold on to the glorious moment that had just taken place. The final footsteps drifted away from the vast complex, but the energy of that day did not leave with them. It floated in the air of Ouagadougou, slipped through every street corner, touched each rooftop, and settled in the hearts of the 26,000 people who were part of that event. And in that moment, no one saw it as a football match anymore. They saw it as the opening line of a chapter they would tell their children and grandchildren for years to come. Because the greatest thing that day offered was not the inauguration of a stadium, nor the successful match. It was collective awareness. People looked at that structure and saw that their future was no longer a repetition of old days. They understood that this country, once forgotten, once underestimated, once struggling to find its place on the world map, could now stand up and set its own standards. A stadium cannot change lives overnight, but it can ignite belief, and from belief, every transformation becomes possible. For many Burkinabe citizens, that night did not end with the natural exhaustion of a crowded day. It ended with awakening. A young man leaned on an overpass railing, watching the stream of people below, and said he had never imagined his country could create something so beautiful. An older woman holding her grandchild said that when she was young, she never believed she would see Burkina Faso build a world-class landmark. She said that afternoon made her believe that good things may arrive late, but they will come as long as a nation does not lose hope. At a nearby street corner, a group of youths kept singing their chants even long after the event had ended, not because they were still overly excited, but because they wanted to stretch the feeling of living through a historic day for just a little longer. Their simple yet vibrant melodies drifted in the wind, bringing smiles to people nearby. No one wanted to leave that atmosphere, because they knew they had just lived something that might never come again in their lifetime. And as people walked home, many realized that what they carried with them was not the image of the stadium, not the thunderous cheers, not even the breathtaking skydiving. What they carried was renewed belief that the people of Burkina Faso deserve a developed nation, deserve the respect of the world, and deserve the future they are building together. That belief was not handed to them from the outside. It rose from their own hearts, from the way they behaved, from the unity they showed, and from the trust they placed in their leadership. That day will not end as just an event. It is a reminder that every nation has a moment of transformation, and that moment often begins not with grand decisions on paper, but with simple, profound shifts within its people. When they recognize their true strength, when they walk together in order and dignity, when they raise their national flag side by side, they show that change does not come from a single person. It comes from an entire nation standing together. And now, with that fire burning bright in the hearts of the people of Burkina Faso, the most important question is not what event the stadium will host next. The question is whether we have the courage to keep that fire alive. Because renewal does not happen in a single day. It must be nurtured with responsibility, with will, with unity, and with the understanding that every person has a role in this journey. If you have walked through this story until this moment, I believe something inside you is moving too. If you believe Burkina Faso is writing a new chapter, leave your thoughts in the comments, subscribe to the channel to continue following the stories that are reshaping a nation and inspiring an entire continent. What you do today may become part of the fire that lights the future.